Tonight, Trump attacks Zelenskyy once again, accusing Ukraine's president of damaging ceasefire talks and prolonging a killing field. The Trump intervention came after another night of deadly airstrikes and a new ultimatum to agree to a ceasefire on U.S. terms or see Washington walk away. Zelenskyy has responded, saying emotions have run high today. We'll ask if Trump's patience is about to run out and explore where that would leave Ukraine. Also tonight, India on high alert and hitting out at Pakistan with a raft of measures that indicate where it feels some of the blame lies for a deadly terror attack in Kashmir.
I'm Anna Botting, live in Rome, as tens of thousands paid their respects to the Pope. All day, pilgrims have queued for over 8 hours to say goodbye to the late Pontiff as he lies in state for the next 3 days.
Also on the programme, our Asia correspondent goes into China's Silicon Valley and speaks to the tech bosses looking to outdo its global rivals. Plus, would the UK make any sacrifices to help secure a US trade deal? We asked the Chancellor in Washington. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. Could the United States soon give up on Ukraine? The slow progress of ceasefire talks is clearly grating on the Trump administration. So too, the actions of Ukraine's leader. Tonight, President Trump lashed out at President Zelenskyy again. He accused him of damaging efforts towards peace by publicly saying he would never recognize the occupation and annexation of Crimea. It came after a 7-point peace plan devised by the United States was briefed out. In it, there was the suggestion that current battle lines be frozen, leaving Crimea very much in Russia's hands. After its release, the vice president was clear. This was a take-it-or-leave-it deal.
We've issued a very explicit proposal to both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and it's time for them to either say yes or for the United States to walk away from this process.
Well, that ultimatum is systematic of the Trump approach. Take it or leave it. Do as I say. It is, according to my main guest tonight, Fiona Hill, further evidence of Trump's desire to revive the idea of spheres of influence, the idea that only a select group of nations get to run the world. In Trump's eyes, that is the United States and China, and it would appear Russia. In Hill's eyes, Trump wants an end to the fighting in Ukraine to also be the start of a new friendship with Vladimir Putin, a leader he admires and, in Hill's eyes, wants to emulate.
This is really the first time that we've had a US president who wants to emulate the Russian leader in some way, who wants to create a hyper-personalized presidency, who wants to, actually basically govern his own country in a very similar fashion.
Well, that begs the question, where do spheres of influence leave those countries like Ukraine that don't have a say? For Zelenskyy, concessions have felt more like a surrender. But if he doesn't agree to them and the United States walks away, then what next for him and his country? We'll get into all of that in a moment. But first, our main report comes from our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes.
They battle to put out the flames from another Russian strike. Ukrainian officials say this is a residential building in the city of Kharkiv. Hardly the ceasefire Donald Trump is pushing for, even after Washington issued a proposal for peace to Kyiv and Moscow. Yet he's blaming Ukraine's president, not Russia's leader, for making it hard to end the war after Volodymyr Zelenskyy said his country would never recognize Crimea as Russian. In a post on social media, the US president said, "The statement made by Zelenskyy today will do nothing but prolong the killing field, and nobody wants that. We are very close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play should now finally get it done. I look forward to being able to help Ukraine and Russia get out of this complete and total mess that would have never started if I were president." The Ukrainian leader then also took to social media to post this US statement from 2018 under the previous Trump administration that endorsed his position that Crimea is Ukrainian. Mr. Zelenskyy wrote, "Emotions have run high today, but it is good that 5 countries met to bring peace closer. The American side shared its vision, Ukraine and other Europeans presented their inputs, and we hope that it is exactly such joint work that will lead to lasting peace. We are grateful to partners." The latest spat came after Washington scrapped a plan for the US Secretary of State to come to London to meet with his British, Ukrainian, French and German counterparts. Talks did still take place between senior officials inside this Foreign Office building, but they were a downgrade on the original idea. I'm told areas of discussion included a ceasefire deal, security guarantees for Ukraine once the fighting stops, and the hugely sensitive issue of territory. Keith Kellogg, the US envoy for Ukraine, was present, but the absence of Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, will surely mean the outcome of these talks will carry much less weight in Washington. Donald Trump's latest outburst against Mr. Zelenskyy will doubtless be applauded by this man. Speaking with members of his defence industry, Vladimir Putin is reportedly ready to agree to freeze the war in Ukraine along current front lines in a deal with the US. But he still sounds very focused on keeping his own military strong.
The troops have received over 4,000 units of armoured weapons, 180 combat aircraft and helicopters. More than 1.5 million drones of various types have also been delivered, including about 4,000 drones sent to the front lines every day.
Back in Ukraine, it was a Russian drone that killed at least 9 people in a strike on this bus. The daily, deadly reality of a war this country did not start, but is under intense pressure to stop. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Well, let's bring in our James Matthews from Washington. And James, I mean, it was really only a matter of time before we saw this rupture again in relations between President Trump and President Zelenskyy, both men using social media to air their grievances. In the last few minutes, President Zelenskyy has put out a 2018 statement where the then Secretary of State, Pompeo, acknowledged that they would never recognize Crimea as part of Russia. So we're seeing this play out again in public very much.
Yeah, we are, Yalda. The denigration of each other and each other's positions and diplomacy once again with the use of a foghorn, uncomplimentary, almost taunting from both sides, certainly on the part of Zelenskyy, I think invoking the memory and the words of Mike Pompeo, no friend of Donald Trump. He won't like that. That will offend Donald Trump's vanity. But, for all Donald Trump in his Truth Social post, talking about how close a deal is, I think we get a clear sense, actually, of how far a deal is at the moment. Deborah spoke in her reporting about this take it or leave it moment, the ultimatum being issued by the Americans. That's certainly the case. They are applying maximum pressure. But I don't think you have to be too cynical to conclude that Donald Trump is also trying to give himself an exit strategy in all of this, staring down the barrel of failure. Remember, he's the guy who said he could solve this inside 24 hours. Well, it has failure written all over it right now. The notion that America could lay out a 7-point plan and put Crimea at the heart of it, the ultimate red line, so red it's almost purple for the Ukrainians. That was never going to fly in Kyiv. Trump will know that. So for him to hope that the Ukrainians will fold, clearly leads us towards yet another impasse. The Ukrainians' line is that amounts to surrender for them, and that simply will not happen. So that's where we are. We are at the kind of approaching an endgame. That certainly as the Americans would frame it, although negotiations to some degree are still taking place. The Ukrainian Prime Minister, actually was in Washington today speaking to the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. They spoke about investment, spoke about economic reconstruction, very much focusing on the vision of Ukraine beyond peace. Of course, the difficulty, the extreme difficulty, is how Ukraine will look beyond any peace whenever that happens, because clearly there are competing visions of that in Kyiv and in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, absolutely, James. And it very much became clear with Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff pulling out from these London talks that they don't want to be seen as some kind of neutral negotiator where there's multiple rounds of talks that go on and on and on. Donald Trump wants to see some kind of outcome pretty quickly. And that's why we're hearing, I guess, this language that, you know, if we don't get a yes from both sides, we're going to move on. I guess the question is, where does that leave Ukraine? And what does Donald Trump do in terms of support for Ukraine going forward?
Well, that is the key question, not just for Ukraine, but I suppose for the wider world, Yalda, isn't it? I think the Rubio thing is interesting. My reading of it is that he would have seen the possibility or the probability that there wouldn't be any progress in that London meeting. I think there's every chance that he didn't want to be associated with failure. Donald Trump's travelling to the Middle East in a couple of weeks' time. There had been talk that he would be meeting Vladimir Putin. That has yet to be confirmed. Still nothing in the diary as of yet. So that's the victory lap that Donald Trump is trying to construct over the next few weeks. First foreign trip as president, meeting perhaps with Putin, sealing the deal on Ukraine and presenting himself as the peacemaker, the deal maker. That's what he said at his inauguration. He wanted to be the president who could make peace. Right now, he's the president who's making something of a mess of the Ukrainian situation. He recognizes that. That's why he's looking for fall guys. Chief among them is Zelenskyy.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, we will be following all the coverage when President Trump travels to the Middle East and see how all of this unfolds. James, thanks so much for all of your analysis there. Well, Trump claims this isn't all about Crimea, but what are the territories affected by the United States' ceasefire proposal? Here's Professor Michael Clark with his military analysis.
Overnight, the United States briefed to some of the press a 7-point peace plan, which they thought was the basis, or seems to be the basis, of a possible deal which they're touting both to the Europeans with Ukraine and to Russia. And it involves the idea of a ceasefire in place. Ukraine is the biggest physical territory in Europe, apart from Russia itself. And a ceasefire in place would mean that the Russians would keep all that they have conquered, although they wouldn't keep absolutely all they claim, because they claim to have complete control over, or annexed the 4 provinces of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson. They wouldn't be able to keep all of that because they haven't conquered it all. But significantly, the other side of the plan was that the Americans say that they would recognize the Russian control over Crimea, the sovereign control over Crimea. Now, that's not likely to be acceptable to the Europeans. It certainly isn't acceptable to the Ukrainians, but that's what the Americans seem to be offering. For the Russians to give up some of what you claim in these 4 provinces in return for recognition in Crimea. And some other little details that the Russians will be required to withdraw a little bit from the river Dnieper, because that would give the Ukrainians complete control of the river, which is very important to them in economic terms, since that's their outlet to the Black Sea and therefore to world markets. So the Russians would gain a great deal but have to lose a little bit. The Ukrainians would lose a lot de facto, and they would lose control in law, according to the American plan, of Crimea. One other detail is Zaporizhia, the nuclear power plant. The fact is that the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is in the area that Russia controls, but Zaporizhia, the city, very important industrial city, 750,000 people before the fighting started, is in Ukrainian control. So somebody would have to control the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, because Ukraine will need the power from that plant. And the idea might be, according to this leaked plan, is that the United States might control the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Certainly, somebody other than Russia would need to control it, because it has to provide some power for Ukraine itself. Those are the territorial outlines of the plan. It is also stated that the plan would agree to lift American sanctions on Russia, but that wouldn't necessarily lift European sanctions, of course, so there'd be a dispute possibly between the United States and Europe over that. It would also involve the idea of a different attitude from Ukraine towards NATO membership. No chance of NATO Ukraine having membership of NATO for the foreseeable future. That's plausible, but won't be very welcome. The fact is, there's a lot in this plan which Ukraine is unlikely to agree to, even though they say, the Ukrainians say, that we will go for an immediate ceasefire and then we will talk. What the Russians say is we need to talk a lot before we'll go for a ceasefire. At the moment, the Americans think that they can sell this both to Europe and the Ukrainians, as well as to Russia. It remains to be seen if they can. I think there's a very strong set of talks to come up over the next few days, and we'll see how that goes.
That was Professor Michael Clark there. Well, as I mentioned at the start of the programme, I've been speaking to Fiona Hill, a former national security advisor to President Trump on Russia. She's been in the room with President Trump and President Putin. She told me the US leader now wants to model himself on his Russian counterpart and run his own country just as Putin rules Russia. We started, though, on the hopes of a ceasefire deal and the state of talks as of today. Have a listen.
The best that we can be really hoping for is some kind of agreement at a ceasefire. And as we know, over Easter, there was an attempt to broker a ceasefire between both Russia and Ukraine. In fact, there's been many declarations of ceasefires which have actually been violated, which is something that President Zelenskyy had kept complaining about when he was speaking previously to President Trump. So this is really the stage that we're at. A peace deal in any kind of negotiations is always a long way off. We're hearing a lot of rumours being put on the table about territorial exchanges, those being, pretty one-sided on the part of Ukraine, all kinds of statements that may or may not be coming out of Russian sources about potentially Russia not going any further than the territory it currently occupies. And I would just tell everybody listening to this that we're in for the long haul here. This is going to be a very long, drawn-out situation, and we should be tempering expectations about any kind of breakthrough.
And yet the Trump administration seems to be putting a lot of pressure, certainly on the Ukrainian side, to try and get to some kind of peace agreement or deal as soon as possible. I mean, just in the last 24 hours, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, told reporters in India that they're expecting for both sides to agree to whatever deal the Trump administration has put on the table, or, frankly, the United States would walk away or move on. What do you think that actually means?
Well, what it means is it's the Trump administration's timeline. It's the president's and it's the vice president's timeline. It's Trump who has actually pushed this at this particular juncture. He is the person who has the most at stake here in terms of securing a ceasefire and getting a peace deal. He famously said that he would get a deal within 24 hours during his campaign. And he said then that he wanted something within the first 100 days of his presidency, which is around now, or he wanted to have a deal by Easter. And the point is that the two sides who are directly involved in the conflict, both Ukraine and Russia, are not at that place yet. So you've basically got one party in all of this, which is the United States, and a very personalised approach by President Trump that wants something that the other two parties are not willing at this point to give. And then you've got lots of other players, not just the United Kingdom and European actors, but also China, Iran, North Korea, and many others who are involved tangentially or even, directly in this conflict. This is the largest military conflict in Europe since World War II. So, of course, it's going to be pretty complicated.
Fiona, you've worked closely with the Trump administration the first time round and with Donald Trump. Do you think there is a strategy here? Do you think they do have a plan when it comes to Ukraine? And it isn't just some kind of ad hoc, look, we've got to get this sorted within 24 hours or within his 100 days or whatever timeline the president might have?
Well, of course there's a plan, but it's a one-sided plan. I think that, this is really what's at stake here. President Trump wants to regularize, normalize, and reset the relationship with Russia. That's very clear. It's been clear since the first presidency of President Trump. He's always wanted to sit down with Vladimir Putin and sort out all of the difficulties in the bilateral relationship, everything from nuclear issues and nuclear arms reduction. There's all kinds of economic and business deals that Trump himself and his immediate circle are very interested in. It's not really about US-Russian relations writ large. And he has, obviously an interest, as he said many times, about forging a personal relationship beyond what it is already with Putin. And he wants to extricate the United States from its support from Ukraine. He's also said that very clearly. He also wants to pull back from the underpinning of European security and get the Europeans to pick up not just support for Ukraine, but also a much more involvement and much more in-depth payment for all of their own security. That's also very clear. So yes, there is a strategic perspective there. And I think, part of the US strategy and the Trump administration strategy is to push the Europeans to go off, essentially on their own in terms of framing what they want in European security and making it very clear to the Ukrainians that they can't expect much more future support from the United States.
I guess at this point, then, is it very much clear the message is that the United States can't be relied upon?
Absolutely. I mean, certainly not in terms of continuing its support for Ukraine and in terms of the continuation of the kind of support that the United States has been giving to Europe and European security until now. Frankly, President Trump isn't unique in this. US leaders have been making this clear to Europeans for a very long time now, including going back more than 10 years to the Wales summit of NATO when Barack Obama was president. There's been a push to get Europeans to step up their role in their own security. It goes back even decades before that. And Trump is now giving this in the form of an ultimatum.
Fiona, you just said that, what we're seeing in terms of Donald Trump pushing for the Europeans to step up, it's something that other presidents in the United States have called for more than a decade. Would you say that other presidents have also, taken the Donald Trump path in trying to reset relations with Russia, namely President Obama, even before him, President Bush? I mean, in many ways, there are those who believe that Ukraine was a gift to the United States and President Biden too didn't really want, and it's something that the Ukrainians have said to me in the past, that while the Americans have wanted Ukraine to win, they haven't wanted Russia to lose either.
Of course, because always since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, going back to the early 90s, US leaders have been very nervous about the complete collapse of Russia in some form or another. The United States has always prioritized Russia in its relationships with the former Soviet republics. And that goes for Ukraine as well. Everything has always been looked at through the prism of Moscow. There's been constant efforts to reset that relationship. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, they've all tried it. But what's different about President Trump, it's not the fact that he wants to reset that relationship. It's just it's so personal for him. And it very much fits into his own worldview. He and Vladimir Putin have shockingly similar worldviews, which is not something you could say about previous US presidents. They did want to have a personal relationship with whoever the Russian leader was at the time. Bill Clinton and Boris Yeltsin had a very personal relationship that really dominated the US-Russia relationship. But this is really the first time that we've had a US president who wants to emulate the Russian leader in some way, who wants to create a hyper-personalized presidency, who wants to, actually basically govern his own country in a very similar fashion, very top-down without any checks and balances, and somebody, again, who shares the same worldview of a world that is divided up among three major powers, Russia, the United States and China, with very clear spheres of influence. That was not the direction of travel of other US presidents. So in actual fact, there's probably more chance under Trump of a close relationship between Trump and Putin, and at least between the top of the US and Russia, than there has been previously. But let's just say that broader US sentiment is not moving in that direction. Trump has managed to change the sentiment of some of the people around him in the Republican Party, but you're still seeing in polling in the United States a great deal of suspicion, particularly towards Vladimir Putin, even if there's always been, some modicum of support of improving relationships overall with Russia.
That was Fiona Hill, former Deputy National Security Advisor to Donald Trump in the first Trump administration. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme, we report from Kashmir as India vows to track down those behind a terror attack in the disputed territory in which at least 26 people were killed.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. The reality of life under Russian fire. People don't want to leave, even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos. Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety as Russian drones will be trying to find this position.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood, hopes and dreams framed by war. Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment.
We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful.
With global threats rising, I also explore defence and security in the UK and across NATO. This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force. This is routine training for NATO, but should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real. Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans. The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want to jump in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. The United States appears to be showing some diplomatic fatigue over a deal for a ceasefire in Ukraine. But will its efforts with Iran prove more fruitful? Well, Iran's foreign minister said today that ongoing talks with the US are heading in the right direction. But what does that really mean? And could we eventually see Tehran give up its nuclear ambitions in return for the lifting of economic sanctions? It's a topic me and my podcasting co-host Richard Engel picked up on this week's edition of The World podcast. Have a listen. The Iranians want it, the Americans want it, the Trump administration needs this deal. They need a win of some sort. The Iranian regime needs this too. We've seen over the course of the last year the proxies that they have built up in the region, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the groups that they have backed, this so-called axis of resistance or axis of evil or upheaval.
has more or less been dismantled by the Israelis.
So their armor has been removed. Are they coming to the table now because they have no choice, because they need the money, and because they're not in the same military position that they were? Or is this real? Is this a real change? Is this the start of a process that is going to be transformative? And I think Iranians don't really know. They're hopeful that it's the latter, but they're also willing to take the risk that it's the former. That even if Iran is doing this because it's under pressure, Iranians will say, well, who cares? As long as they're taking these steps for whatever reason, maybe it leads to a more positive outcome for them politically, socially, economically.
That was the podcast, and Richard joins me now live from Tehran. Richard, really good to see you, and good to see you coming out live from Iran. Of course, this is very rare to have a journalist inside Iran, and especially an American journalist. And we'll get to that in a moment in terms of, you capturing the pulse of what is actually happening on the streets of Tehran, how are people reacting to this deal. But I just want to take you back to what we heard from the foreign minister, and he said that things seem to be moving in the right direction. But they're also, not necessarily cautiously optimistic. They're a bit nervous because they're not quite sure about the messaging coming out of the United States.
So, Yalda, yeah, and I'll tell you the color in a second. It's been an extraordinary trip. We've been given a lot more access than I've ever had in Iran, both access to the government, access to the streets. I've been able to take taxis around town without a minder, go shopping, walk around, really been able to move in almost an unimpeded way, which is quite extraordinary. And I think that reflects the willingness of the Iranian government to show flexibility, to show that it wants to get this deal accomplished because it needs the money, because it doesn't want to be attacked, a variety of reasons. But in terms of the deal itself, on the surface, Yalda, this is a relatively straightforward deal, or should be. Let's not forget, there was a deal in place, but President Trump, during his first term in office, tore it up. And the deal, ostensibly, is to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. And Iran says it doesn't want to have a nuclear weapon, that it's against its policy. And a senior lawmaker here, a member of the National Security Council, told me inside Iran's parliament, which was extraordinary of itself that I was able to go there, that they're willing to accept more inspectors, international inspectors. They're willing to get rid of their more highly enriched uranium. But he said a red line is giving up the entire nuclear program completely. And he said that Iran needs a basic nuclear program for energy, for medical research, and that they can't give it up entirely. Just today, however, Marco Rubio, American Secretary of State, said that Iran can't enrich uranium at all, meaning it can't even have a civilian nuclear program. And that has people in this country, has the government worried. The Iranian foreign minister appeared to be referencing that in his statement when he said, yes, they're cautiously optimistic, but they worry that the Trump administration is raising the stakes in the last minute, speaking with multiple voices. And it comes down to the nuclear program. Is it about Iran not having any capacity to produce nuclear materials, or just not having a nuclear weapon? Trump himself hasn't been that specific. He's talked about not allowing Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. He's been very clear about that. But when asked directly, can Iran have a civilian program, he's slipped the question. So that is something I think to watch for these talks this weekend. If the U.S. insists no nuclear program of any kind, no enrichment, not even to 3.5%, it could break the deal.
Richard, I've got about a minute left, but I'm really keen to get a sense of just your takeaways. You gave us a brief assessment there of what it's been like for you. You've travelled to Iran in the past, and this trip, as you say, has felt different for you.
It's felt different from the government. I talked about that. The government is giving us a lot more access than they have in the past. We even made social media here when I was interviewing members of the government in the parliament. And yes, American, representing American media, and people here, particularly the hardliners, thought that was very strange, but a sign that they are trying to be more open. But on a popular level, I can say I've gotten an enormously positive reception from people on the street. They see me, they're giving me thumbs up. They think that having Americans here, having American press here is a positive sign, a sign that things are changing. People here really want to open up to the world. They feel that they are socially, politically, economically locked in a box, a sanctions box. And in many ways they are. You can't use credit cards here. You can't trade. If you buy anything, it's almost impossible to pay the people and to get it out of the country. So they hope that this process will continue, that there can be some sort of new nuclear deal, sanctions can be lifted, and that Iran and Iranians can reconnect with the world.
Richard, thank you so much for all of that. And of course, you can listen to more of Richard's analysis and mine on our podcast this week on The World. You can get the QR code on your screen there. Richard, thanks again. Well, India has announced a raft of measures targeting Pakistan today, including the closure of its main border crossing in a move that indicates where it feels some of the blame lies for yesterday's terror attack in Kashmir. India's defence minister had threatened a loud and clear response after at least 26 people were killed, most of them tourists. And that rhetoric has raised concerns about a larger escalation between two nuclear-armed rivals. Well, Kashmir has been a flashpoint in long-running tensions between India and Pakistan. Both claimed the region in full, but control is ultimately split between them. It remains one of the most militarized zones in the world. The two powers agreed the original ceasefire border as the line of control, but tensions have continued to flare up. Eyewitnesses have described seeing the gunmen emerge from a forest near Baisaran Meadow, about 3 miles away from Palmagam in India-controlled Kashmir. Sky's Neville Lazarus is in the region and sent us this report.
Kashmir is tense once again. Security forces are on high alert after the brutal attack on tourists. 26 people have lost their lives and dozens injured when militants fired on them.
People were coming down from up there. We saw 1 or 2 ladies crying. We got scared. We've been in Kashmir for 5 days. We have to go back tomorrow. We couldn't imagine that something like this would happen.
The resistant front, a proxy of the banned terror group Lashkar-e-Toiba, has claimed responsibility. Security forces have circulated a photo and sketches of the attackers. The uncertainty of what might come next is palpable.
We will not only trace those who have carried out this incident, we will also trace those who, sitting behind the scenes, have conspired to commit such nefarious acts on the soil of India.
The last time an attack of such magnitude led to cross-border skirmishes between two nuclear-armed neighbours. The tensions have lasted since.
Security forces are conducting anti-terror operations further down this place. We've seen military and paramilitary convoys rushing to the site of the attack. Outsiders and us have been stopped at this place, not allowed to go any further till investigations are complete. Kashmiris are mourning. There have been protests across many cities against this brutal crime, the repercussions of which will have an effect on the economy that is reliant on tourism. There is a rush to leave Kashmir now. Tourists have converged at the Srinagar airport, awaiting a way out. The government has ordered airlines to add more flights.
We decided to come here, but this incident changes the face of Kashmir again. We are tourists and should think about our safety. It's beautiful, but what safety do we have here?
The impact of almost 500,000 boots on the ground this side of Kashmir could not guarantee absolute peace, which has been shattered once again. It will take a long time to heal. Neville Lazarus, Sky News in Anantnag, Kashmir.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, we head to the Vatican, where tens of thousands of mourners have been queuing to pay their respects to the Pope.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Hello there, good evening. We are live in Rome. Behind us you can see Vatican City, where Pope Francis is lying in state in St. Peter's Basilica. Tens of thousands of people have been queuing to pay their respects to the Pope on the first of 3 days of public mourning before his funeral on Saturday. Live pictures, as you can see, of those who are slowly moving closer to where the Pope is lying in rest in a coffin at ground level, unusually not on a raised platform. Well, let me bring in Sky's Barbara Serra, who's been reporting on the Vatican for more than 20 years and joins me now. First time the public have been able to get near to him. At one point, we're told, by the Vatican, some 100,000 people were in the square and the streets beyond. And now just 1 hour 15 left of viewing, and still they wait.
Absolutely, and I've just been to St. Peter's Square and also Via della Conciliazione, which is the grand avenue that leads to it. And I can tell you there is a queue to join the queue. So you have to queue to get to the barrier where then you can join the queue. So lots of people obviously queuing now. Remember, for many people, they would have chosen to join the queue in the evening so they don't have to stand under what was pretty scorching sun earlier on. Now, the Vatican has also told us that as of 8 p.m. local time, so 9 hours after the gates opened to the St. Peter's Basilica, just under 20,000 people had managed to see the Pope, to pay their last respects. But that was 3 hours ago, so many, many more people now. And the question is whether the Vatican will decide to extend the hours within which it allows people to pay their respects publicly. It's meant to close at midnight local time, so that's what, an hour, 20 minutes. Our sources are telling us that they might be extending it. They did extend it for Pope John Paul II 20 years ago, but we haven't heard anything official yet.
Barbara, more from you in just a moment. First of all, though, let's hear from Sky's Lisa Holland, who reports on a day when Catholics from across the world came to pay their final respects.
From early morning, crowds began to gather to see Pope Francis returned to his people. Some had already started queuing in the hope of later passing by his open casket, including Rachel, John and Chris on a pilgrimage from Greater Manchester. They were scheduled to have had an audience with the Pope today.
We've been so close that we just wanted to be fully part of it and just come and pay our respects. It's like one of the family.
We just want to come and say thank you. We feel really privileged to be here on this day in history.
Well, this is all about him. They've all come for Pope Francis. He was such a special, kind and inclusive man.
At 9 a.m, the bustle of St. Peter's Square gave way to the solemnity of mourning. People straining to see as Pope Francis's coffin was carried up the steps of the Basilica. 2 days after the 88-year-old passed away suddenly from a stroke, his body was brought from his apartments at the Vatican to lie in state. In accordance with the wishes of a pope who championed the poor, his coffin rested not on a raised catafalque, but a simple platform. The Pope's body will remain here until his funeral on Saturday, with several 100,000 people expected to pass by to pay their respects. Outside, this woman said she had cycled from Naples to Rome to be here. Bev and Caroline are on holiday from Canada.
I just think it's a very momentous thing, historic. He was well loved, and to see everybody here is just amazing.
Then, as the service came to an end, a man clutching his baby could be seen amongst the crowd who spontaneously started running, all anxious to join the queues to get inside.
Throughout the morning, the crowds have grown. There are lines of people snaking in literally every direction, people coming from every side of St. Peter's Basilica with that one objective, just to get that moment to pay their respects to Pope Francis. How are you?
Oh, yeah, amazing, good, amazing experience.
Good,
yeah.
By early afternoon, Rachel, John and Chris, who we first saw this morning in the queue, had become some of the very first members of the public to pass by the coffin of Pope Francis.
It's so calm and peaceful in there.
Before that was that we all walked up towards the Pope's casket, and he was laid facing us on his back, uncovered, so we could see him very, very clearly. And then we had just had a moment, a wonderful moment there, just say our own prayers, maybe less than a minute, but that's all it needed.
The wait to file past the Pope's body grew to 8 hours long, with so many coming to commemorate a pontiff who famously was at his happiest amongst the people. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Vatican City.
And Barbara, we learnt tonight that the funeral itself will be 1.5 hours long, and more too about the procession to the burial site.
Absolutely, because we need to remember it's very uncommon for a pope to be buried outside of the Vatican, so technically he'll be buried in Italy. And the Vatican has released a possible route, and it will go past the Trevi Fountain and the Colosseum. It's to the east of the Vatican, about 3-4 kilometers. Obviously, there will be road closures. There's a lot of coordinating with the Italian authorities, but they have said it's going to be very slow. And I think what that is going to give is an opportunity for the people who perhaps don't want to commit to queuing 8 hours, but still want to be part of the procession and the funeral on Saturday.
Yes, we wait to see if the Vatican extends the hours for tonight. In the meantime, 2 more days of those efforts of people to see Pope Francis. Yalda.
Anna, thank you so much. Now to China, where tech startups full of confidence say they're ready to make their mark on the world and fight back against President Trump's tariffs. Chinese companies like AI startup DeepSeek are already challenging Western competition, and the rapid rate of innovation means they are optimistic about the future. Our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith reports.
The city of Hangzhou is coming into view, and the world is paying attention. This is China's Silicon Valley, confident, ascendant, and charting its own path to a high-tech future.
Competition is a good thing.
That is a good thing.
Yeah. In hubs like this, entrepreneurs brim with enthusiasm. For their businesses, yes, but for China and its tech scene too.
We have the talents, we have the environment, we have the full supply chain. Even though we have a challenging environment, yeah, it's our time.
Yeah.
It's our time.
It's our time. But that's exciting.
Yes, of course. Yes, and I think it's our time to show and battle with other foreign countries. So I think it's our time.
Chinese people actually love technology.
Zhang Jie has been mentoring and investing in Hangzhou tech startups for some 20 years. More young people are approaching her now than ever before.
In China, we have more than 10 million university and college student graduation. Then we're talking about at least 5 to 6 million of engineers. So with a good environment, a favorable environment for the entrepreneurship, I'm sure there will be even greater company came in the future.
Right now in China, tech leaders are in vogue. Photo ops and handshakes, an abrupt change from the crackdown they faced just a few years ago. And there's one name they're particularly proud of here, even though there's no name on the building. DeepSeek, the startup that stunned the world. What DeepSeek created here, an AI model as good as Western alternatives for a fraction of the price, has been genuinely game-changing. Not just in terms of AI advancement, but also in terms of how this industry is viewed. For China, it's inspirational innovation and proof that tech could be the backbone of the future economy. But for others, like America, it's viewed as a threat. Indeed, Donald Trump is ramping up restrictions. This is the boss of America's leading chip firm, NVIDIA, rushing to Beijing to shore up business. They are well aware here of the cut in ties to the US, but most believe they can cope.
Microscopic scanning equipment.
Dr. Song Ning invited us back to his laboratory. These microscopes will pair with AI to massively speed up medical diagnostics. For them, the pursuit of American customers is on pause.
I do not think by limiting the scientific and technological progress of China or other countries, Trump will be able to achieve his goal. I think it's a false premise. It will only force us to have more tech innovation.
The trade war will still leave a hole in China's economy. Tech firms, however advanced, can't yet fill that gap. But the innovation here is rapid, and it will leave its mark on the world. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News in Hangzhou.
The Chancellor has told Sky News the UK will not rush through a trade deal with the United States and will only sign an agreement that serves Britain's national interests. Here's Rachel Reeves.
It's clear that the United States also wants to secure an agreement with the UK, which reflects the huge strengths our economy has, the political and financial stability that Britain is able to offer, as well as being a country that is open to business, investment and to trade. So we'll continue those discussions, but I'm really clear that we will only sign a deal if it is in our national interest to do so. That is the red line for this government. On food standards, we've always been really clear that we're not going to be watering down standards in the UK. And similarly, we've just passed the Online Safety Act, and the safety, particularly of our children, is non-negotiable for the British government.
Well, she was speaking to our business and economics correspondent Gurpreet Narwan at the International Monetary Fund's annual meeting in Washington. And Gurpreet joins us now. I mean, the Chancellor really drawing her red lines there.
Yeah, I think what we got from the Chancellor was the firmest set of commitments that the British government will not lower standards or relax regulations in exchange for a trade deal. Not on food, not on cars, and not on online safety regulation. And in doing so, Rachel Reeves shut down months of speculation about whether the British government might concede on any of those, particularly online safety. We know that the US tech giants have been pushing back against the UK's online safety bill, which forces them to shield children from harmful content online. And the UK government actually included a review of those rules in an earlier draft agreement before Donald Trump imposed his sweeping tariffs. So there was considerable uncertainty in that area, but the Chancellor today shut it down. She said, the safety of our children is non-negotiable for the British government. So what is the Chancellor prepared to offer the Americans? Well, I think the sense that we got from her today was that it's the tariffs issue that she's working on. There's been some speculation that she might lower tariffs on cars from 10 to 2.5%. So it's looking like a very limited economic deal.
Gurpreet, thank you so much. And that's all for tonight's programme. We're back tomorrow at 9. Good night.